Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'll now report back on behalf of the 46 nations and partners that were present this afternoon at 1 week's notice at the 26th Ukraine Defence Contact Group meeting this afternoon, which I had the privilege to chair. Let me begin by thanking Secretary General Rutte, both for hosting us today at NATO HQ and for the leadership that he's shown on Ukraine since he took office. What we saw today at the UDCG was almost 50 nations making a clear commitment of allies across the world to continue stepping up the support we give to Ukraine in their fight for freedom, in their fight for the future of their country and the future for our wider security. Ukraine walks away from this meeting backed by members of this group, backed by billions of dollars worth of arms and ammunition committed today to keep their warfighters equipped in order to help increase pressure on Putin, to help force Putin to the negotiating table, to help bring closer a durable peace. Can I also say it was a pleasure in his third full week in the job to welcome Secretary Hegseth. He confirmed the US's continued commitment to this group, to Ukraine's pursuit of a lasting peace, and the importance of security guarantees beyond. We heard his call for European nations to step up. We are and we will. NATO allies pledged 40 billion euros in military aid for Ukraine in 2024 and then went on to deliver 50 billion. The majority, nearly 60% of that aid to Ukraine last year came from European nations. And while at the same time we did more on Ukraine and will do more, we did more on defence spending and will do more. So last year saw an increase of 20% in the defence spending of the non-US NATO nations. Europe is stepping up. And finally today we saw a clear commitment to ratchet up the pressure on Putin, military and economic, as Secretary Hegseth said, unleashing US energy production and energy sanctions to further degrade the Russian economy. Looking ahead, we all agree that 2025 will be the critical year for the war in Ukraine. Minister Umerov, who was with us, described how Ukraine's courageous fighters on the front line are hurting Russia. In this conflict that Putin believed he could settle within 3 days, nearly 3 years on, 850,000 Russians have been killed or wounded. Over 1,500 a day, almost double the rate of this time last year, are being killed or wounded. A total of around 60,000 in the last 6 weeks alone, according to our UK Defence Intelligence. But as we saw overnight, the death and destruction in Kyiv, Russia is still ruthless, Russia is still dangerous. And at this critical moment, we will step up further our support to Ukraine. President Zelensky and President Trump have both spoken of their desire to see peace through strength. And the commitments made through the UDCG provide the collective strength that we need to achieve that peace. For our part, the UK will spend £4.5 billion on military aid for Ukraine this year, more than ever before. And today I announced that we will also provide an additional £150 million of new firepower, drones, tanks, air-to-air missiles. More broadly, this government continues to step up our leadership on Ukraine and in NATO. The UK offers unique capabilities to the NATO alliance: forward land forces, fifth-generation fighter jets, our nuclear deterrence. Our UK commitment to NATO is unshakable. And Ukraine's security matters to global security. That's why the UDCG is an international coalition that stretches beyond Europe through to the Indo-Pacific, to South America, and to the Middle East. Because this was never a war about the fate of just one nation. When the border of one country is redrawn by force, it undermines the security of all nations. And if aggression goes unchecked on one continent, it emboldens regimes on other continents. And so, on stepping up support for Ukraine, we are and we will. On stepping up for European security, we are and we will. We're 50 nations and partners strong, determined to stop Putin's war, determined to do so together, united in our pursuit of peace through strength. Thank you. I'm now going to call three questioners, starting with Johnny Beale from the BBC.
Thank you, Secretary of State. Until now, the Ukraine Contact Group, which you've just chaired, and NATO have been able, broadly, to present a united front on Ukraine. Today, the new US Defence Secretary has punched a hole in that unity. No NATO membership for Ukraine, he says. He says that Ukraine cannot expect to go back. It's unrealistic to go back to its original borders. He says there will be no US guarantees in terms of boots on the ground in Ukraine if there's a negotiated settlement. Do you accept that that is completely contrary to what you've been saying and many of your NATO allies have been saying for the past few years? And also on the subject of security guarantees, if America doesn't put boots on the ground, do you really think that Britain, Europe, other NATO allies can fill that void, are willing to do that? Thank you very much.
So what Secretary Hegseth set out today was confirmation of his commitment to continued involvement in this Ukraine Defence Contact Group. That's the international coordination of support for Ukraine. That will be maintained. What he set out was his commitment, President Trump's commitment, like ours, to see a durable peace to this conflict. And what he set out was a determination to work alongside, but also see other nations, especially in Europe, stepping up to support Ukraine, which we will, stepping up to do more on European security, which we will, stepping up to do more on defence spending, which we will. And we, as a NATO alliance, to which he also gave the firmest possible continuing commitment, have always been clear that Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO. That is a process that will take some time. And for now, our duty, my duty as a defence minister, the duty of the nations around that table, is to make sure that Ukraine is in the strongest possible position going into any talks in the future. Thank you. I call, forgive me, I've got my list here. Claire Sebastian, CNN.
Thank you very much for taking my question. I want to follow up on the comments around the US Defence Secretary ruling out NATO membership for Ukraine as part of a peace settlement. Look, no one ever suggested that that was imminent, and certainly not the Biden administration, but do you think spelling it out like that risks looking like capitulating to one of Moscow's key demands when clearly they are looking for signs of weakness in this transatlantic alliance?
So the nations around the table, the UK is strongly behind President Trump's determination to secure an end to this conflict. to secure what he has said he wanted, which is a durable peace. And the commitment that we have made is to make sure that we put Ukraine in the strongest possible position while it is fighting when it chooses to talk. And for the US, Secretary Hegseth also laid out how, alongside the continuing military support for Ukraine that together we must provide, stepping up the pressure on Russia through energy, through economics, through diplomacy, is part of President Putin's pledge to bring President Trump's pledge to bring President Putin to the table. Lily Bayer, Reuters.
Thank you very much. I'd like to follow up on the questions from my colleagues. One thing we also heard from Secretary Hegseth is he said that Europe must provide the overwhelming share of future lethal and non-lethal aid to Ukraine. From your perspective, is this doable and realistic as a goal? Can Europe actually provide the largest share, the overwhelming share of assistance, and still put Ukraine in that strong position that you were describing? Thank you.
What the nations around the table and the discussion this afternoon confirmed was that the European nations and the wider international nations, alongside the US, can and must step up the help for Ukraine, and we will. But what Secretary General Rutte has also confirmed today is that 58% of the military aid put into the hands of the Ukrainians in the last year was provided and delivered by European nations. So we are stepping up the support for Ukraine. We will do more. We'll do that alongside the Americans, and we will do that to support the President Trump's pledge to bring Putin to the table and to secure a durable, lasting peace to this war in Ukraine. Thank you very much.